Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today because we all know that we have limits on our time. We had a recent episode where we talked about our limitations, but today we're not just talking about the limits on I only get 24 hours in a day. We're talking about the number of our days. Right. And thankfully, as believers, we know that the Lord knows the number of our days. And yet, as my guest and I were just talking about before we hit record, there is to be a healthy sense of urgency around our time and our plans for what's going to happen at the end of those days. And so Shelly Grimm is here today as my guest. We're going to be talking about the CEO system. You guys know we love some CEO stuff around here. To help busy women stop wasting time searching for documents, especially when you're in a crisis, when we talk about some of the things that this is going to relate to, so that you can steward your family's future with the same excellence that you steward your business with. Because Shelly, I don't know if you know, but that's what we're about here on Redeem Her Time, is how do we steward not only our time, but also these businesses and lives that God has given us. So I'm excited to welcome you to the Redeem Her Time podcast and get to know you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and who you are outside of the work you do. I want to know, what kinds of things are going on in this season of life.
Obviously, I am Shelly Grimm, and I am the author. Also an advocate. I'm a mom. I'm a caregiver, and I am all of those things. But I'm also the person who started the Perpetual Caregiver organization, and it brought me through this season of life, I guess, after being a caregiver to both my mother and my son back to back. But really, it's just been putting some things together over the course of my life to bring me to what I feel like has been a calling since I was very young. And I feel like some other components of my personality brought me to what now I'm seeing all the CEO things that you have within your system. I feel like we probably were kindred spirits,
Right? Yeah, I love this.
because my entire organization systems, if you will, or tools that I use are to really help people break down the difference between what caregiving is, which is the love portion of what we do because we care for someone,
Right.
and the portion that has to be business oriented because we wear so many multiple hats.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we're called to a different level of witnessing
Yeah.
and being good stewards of what God's called us to do.
Yeah.
And if we're not organized and able to be solid witnesses for Him, it really makes it difficult. We tend to come off as martyrs instead of good stewards.
Yeah, right. And none of us want to be that. And yet so often, right, even by our own doing or not doing, we tend to put ourselves in that category. So you kind of alluded a little bit to this. I would love to hear, tell us a little bit more about the work you're doing and tell us a little bit about the journey. I know you mentioned this kind of God started putting some breadcrumbs on this trail from way back when you were young. So whatever parts of the journey you want to kind of take us on to help us understand more fully what you do and why you're so passionate and called to it.
Sure. I think probably the most important part is that my mother was the first female that was documented as to having been diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1956. She was
Wow.
18 years old, and I was born in 1964. So that tells you that was long before the journey with she and I began. But my sister was born in 1958, so they were the first. She was the first child born of a woman with Crohn's disease.
Wow.
It wasn't even called Crohn's then. They called it terminal ileitis. Dr. Crohn did some research on it, and that was how it became Crohn's disease later on. But they didn't have any medicine for my mother to even take until 14 years after she was diagnosed. So I became involved, I guess, as her caregiver when I was 5. My parents were divorced when I was 3, and she nearly died when I was 5. And it was just she and I. My grandmother took care of my sister, and my dad had custody of my brother, who he had fathered from another marriage. And really, the houses were full, right? So it was really just me and my mom. And I was a happy child. I think my faith has carried me through those early caregiving years. And really, it wasn't so much that I took care of her as much as I took care of myself.
Yeah.
I didn't, young children demand a lot. I didn't demand anything. I really didn't, and I did as much for her as I possibly could.
Mm.
So those are really the things that I think sacrifice is something that I learned really early on, and
Sure.
patience is something that I learned early on. And it built a life for me of those are the ways that I think I began my early Christian walk.
Mm.
Stewardship, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so the journey for me to build this perpetual caregiver and the things that I've done as a Christian business owner in the past 28, 29 years that I've been that, have really allowed me to juggle all those things and be able to be the chief cook, bottle washer,
Right.
mom, author, advocate, um, sometimes, whatever it was I need, referee, whatever it was I needed to be at that time. But to do it under a tremendous amount of pressure, but also be able to be a resource to others
Mm.
and also educate and empower
Yeah.
other people, which is the extra step that I think you want to cover today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Before we get into that, I was able to preview your book and get to know a little bit more about your story. And I know, and you just mentioned a little bit about this, like you mentioned starting preaching to your stuffed animals as a little girl. So how would you say that your faith helped you survive being a caregiver, especially because you said you were so young when you were really starting to take care of your mom.
Yeah,
So yeah, maybe just
yeah,
tell us a little more about that.
sure. I think one thing that's kind of funny about that, my mother was agnostic. My
Okay.
mother wasn't even a Christian woman at that point. Now she became extremely devout and very much was a Christian upon her death. But um, the interesting thing about, you know, people can say whatever they want to, but I absolutely know that when God calls you, He calls you. Because I was 5 years old and said that I wanted to go to church, and I did. I went, and my mom was like, "Well, just start asking people." So I
Wow.
just started asking people. My grandmother lived next door to her brother, and they went to a little Baptist church called Bicota. Be ye kind one to another.
Hmm.
Bicota.
Yeah.
Bicota Baptist Church. So anyway, I asked if I could go with them, and they could. And I loved going to that little church because they had these little bitty Bibles that they put by the back door that would have whatever the sermon was that day. So like it
Okay.
was on Ephesians 5:11. They'd have it'd be the scripture, and then it'd be various points about that scripture written in there. And so I'd ask my Aunt Edna, "Can I have how many of these can I have?" And she'd say, "Oh, take as many as you want to."
Oh.
I get it. Now my dad was a printer,
You tell a kid how many to take, then
right?
right.
And then my daddy's a printer. I appreciated paper.
Yes, right?
You're an ordinary child. So I'd gather up as many, I'd get 10. And then I'd go home and I'd put all my stuffed animals up, and I had to get my chair. Now, look, I had no children on my block. I was an only child.
Wow.
I had a mother who slept constantly. She had no medicine. The only way that she was relieved was sleeping. So
Wow.
I would get all my little stuffed animals and I'd get them all lined up. I'd put a little Bible in each one of their little hands, those by Coda Baptist. I had all kinds. And I'd put them up there and then I'd start preaching.
Yeah, right. I just love how the Lord draws us, and it's so clear that it's not, it's of him, right? And nothing that's of us. So I
Well,
love that. And then that informs everything, right? And how we approach our time in the years and all that we have. So
the
let
stage was made for me. So,
right?
I mean, at that point, it was just, my mom was like, all right, here we go. So after that, I was in pageants and I was, after that, she was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we just have to keep the confidence going, but we have to keep it grounded.
Right? Yes, yes.
Keep it
Confidence,
grounded
the right
and keep it
kind.
grounded.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so
She was
let's
a horrible mother, but she was a fantastic woman. I mean, because she never thought she was going to have the chance to be a mother. So
sure.
the
Yeah.
maternal instincts and all that, I was the one with all the maternal instincts. I was
Okay.
the one like, do you need anything? Can I get you anything? No, but
Mm,
that wasn't her.
yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah. Well, you've been caretaking for a while, so you
yeah,
know a thing or two about this. And, it's
yeah,
interesting because we all know that caretaking, brings its own challenges. And my audience is mostly midlife women who are in like what I would call a sandwich season.
yeah.
We may still have kids that we're launching in some way, shape, or form. They may still be under our roof. They may already be out, but starting their own families or things like that. But now a lot of us are stepping into caretaking for aging parents, right?
Okay.
So, plus we've got our own, bodies and minds and businesses and things like that that are going on. So it's kind of could be a recipe for all kinds of craziness if we're not careful. So Yeah, let's just kind of talk about maybe some of the challenges of caretaking, especially in a season like midlife, and especially how is this a concern for those of us who are also business owners at the same time?
Yeah, I think one thing that can really happen, unfortunately, when we're trying to juggle that many things, is that we can get lost really, really quickly in all of the duties, and we can start to take on